Alan Semu, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be here.
You represent the Democratic Union Party of Syrian Kurds. Should you and your people have seen Donald Trump's dramatic decision to withdraw US forces from your region coming?
No, we haven't seen it.
But should you have seen it coming? Because Donald Trump, if one looks at the record, as long ago as last December, declared that the US had won its war with Islamic State, and therefore, he said, we're going to withdraw our forces from northern Syria. So in that sense, you had some warning that this might happen.
That's correct, but not in that extent that will suddenly and without any replacement of the forces.
There are people in your region talking of betrayal. Is that a word you are using?
It's more than that and beyond the betrayal. These people have been honored their promises and defeated the global threat to the global threat to the society, the Western society, mostly the Kurds, and now they have been abandoned on their own to face their brutal face of the Turkish aggression, invading on 5 million civilians on northern eastern Syria.
What are you hearing as you try to make contact with your family and friends in northern Syria about what they are facing today?
Unfortunately, the shelling and bombardment have been now continuously for five days, night and time, 24 hours. About 200,000 people have been displaced already, according to UN reports. There are all the towns on the border to Turkey, people have been displaced. Many facilities of hospitals, schools have been bombarded, and people have to seek somewhere else east of Syria to get away, escape from this bombardment.
Much of your family is from near to the town of Kobani, which is close to the Turkish border, was once held by so-called Islamic State fighters, but then, of course, was taken by the Syrian Democratic Force militia. How are your family today? Have they fled, or are they still in their home?
No, they stay home, and most of the people, they're staying home, but they are very, very concerned, and they are following the development. There are some infiltration of the Turkish military and their proxies, which mercenaries have been allied with the Turkey, but there are still people there, and the people defending themselves for security.
What do you say to them when you talk to them on the telephone, and I guess they discuss with you whether it is wise, safe to stay at home or whether they should flee? What do you believe they should do?
They're trying to defend themselves. They said we have seen the wars of ISIS, and Turkey is attacking the civilian, and we have to be very, very careful. But we have no option safer than this, our home. We're going to stay, and we're going to defend ourselves.
So they will fight, will they? Members of your family are going to fight?
My family, all the society, all the people on northern Israel, even civilian now, they're preparing for themselves, students, all teachers, all the part of the communities, member of communities, because they have realized, as you mentioned before, now is no option where we are going to go.
You tell me that your family and everybody in Kobani and other Syrian Kurdish towns will fight, but the truth is it's a military mismatch, isn't it? I mean, the firepower, whether it be by air, artillery, tanks, all of the firepower is on the side of Turkey. You have very little to respond with.
No, we have the will. And this we have proven there for 2014, 2015. We have been defeated. We have a history of victory. We have defeated the most brutal ISIS, which which non-forces, non-military forces stood against them.
With respect, Mr. Simo, obviously you represent a party, but you're in London, so perhaps it's easier to discuss these things from the comfort of London than the reality of living in a place like Kobani. Of course, your forces fought, and we know they fought a very tough battle against Islamic State fighters, but Islamic State fighters do not have an air force, they do not have tanks, they do not have all of the military equipment the Turkish army and its air force have. You cannot expect your forces on the ground to be able to put up meaningful resistance against Turkey.
But we're not going to give it up easily. We're going to defend on the ground. And I totally agree with you that the airspace is most dangerous for Northern Eastern forces now, the military forces. I'm not military man, but this is the fact, as you mentioned it, the airspace, and now therefore the Northern Eastern Syrian people now seeking to have airspace blocked for Turkey. Therefore we have been calling for no-fly zone. And now when America decided yesterday they will draw with all their forces, and the Russian and the regime called and agreed to come to the border, military only, and this is agreement that to prevent the Turkish airspace to breach the Syrian airspace.
Well, we'll get to what the Assad government and the Russians want to do and will do in a moment. But let's go through this piece by piece. For one more moment, let's stick on what your military forces in the so-called YPG are doing on the ground. They are your sort of militia, Syrian Kurdish militia. In response to the Turks occupying Syrian Kurdish towns and villages, they, that is your forces, have been firing shells into Turkish towns just across the border in Turkey, indeed killing a number of civilians. Do you think that is the right response?
It is. You have to defend yourself.
So you think, for example, the civilians who've been killed in Achakalai, and you know that several have been killed, you think that is legitimate, do you? From the point of view of your forces?
It's a self-defense. It's a war. You declare the war. Turkish government had declared war and waged war against these forces. And these forces, they are in their territory, and they have a legitimate right to defend themselves. Everybody has a legitimate right to themselves.
But we're not talking about attacking the Turkish military forces who are taking your towns and villages. We're talking about lobbing shells across the border into Turkey.
What about these 200 people have been killed? Civilian, even the political party leaders, the Syrian Future Party leaders, the co-chair, she has been, assassinated.
You're talking about Hervin Kalaf?
Yes.
And she was brutally murdered.
Yes, and your video is there. What about her? She has no defense to herself. Where she will go, run away?
That raises a question, because she wasn't actually affiliated to the YPG or to the Syrian Defense Forces. She was an independent politician. Do you think that there are now militias at work in northern Syria who are specifically targeting Kurdish politicians?
There are. Mostly the proxy forces which backed by Turkey.
Do you have proof that this is a specific targeted policy?
This is a video saying they are not Turkish soldiers, they are Syrian, they are Ahrar al-Shamia, and they are backed by Turkey, and in the video they're saying in Arabic and in clear language, and they are Syrian. They are Ahrar al-Shamia, which linked to Jabhat al-Nusra.
That is one of the jihadist Islamist groups. So let us talk about the jihadists, the Islamists, who, of course, had a very strong presence in northern Syria for some time, and then your Kurdish forces took them on and beat them in a series of confrontations. Is it your belief that the Turkish move into northern Syria is going to see a revival of the jihadist groups in northern Syria?
This is a fact. This is a fact, and this is a proof of that. As I said, mention it. Afrin, one example. Jarablus, Azaz, yeah, which is in northern Syria, have been occupied bad. So since, yeah.
Are you, in the Kurdish Syrian movement, in a sense, using the threat of a revival of so-called Islamic State as leverage to try to change the mind of Washington or other Western powers not to abandon you?
I wish we could use it, but we are not able. And this is not our view. We're not using it as leverage. We have been calling for the international community, including all European countries, to take responsibility, to take their citizens to have for prosecutions. We wanted justice. If we, as you mentioned, if we do that, the Iraqi government had killed all of them, ISIS fighters. We keep them. We have kept them.
You have kept them.
Yeah, we have
kept them, and I believe there are almost 4,000.
4,500 Iraqis. We did not, because we didn't want to force them. We treated them humanely. All we wanted a justice for them, for the crime they...
Well, let's talk the numbers, because it seems there are almost 12,000 IS fighters. 4,000 of them, it seems, are foreign fighters who've come away from the region to fight with Islamic State. Now, there have been suggestions that there have already been escapes. We know that one camp for displaced IS-related people, mostly women and children, one of the camps near Ain Issa was hit, and as a result there was chaos, and we believe several hundred foreign nationals escaped. Not necessarily fighters, it seems they were family members. But is your message to the outside world today that thousands of Islamic State fighters will be freed one way or another if this war continues?
If you're not going to support to make them secure, right?
You see, that does sound like a threat.
No, it's not. I'm keeping them. I have kept them for 6 months now.
I understand that.
I have fed them.
No, I understand. You've kept them, you've fed them, you've kept them detained. But if you're serious about keeping them detained, why don't you right now, before the Turks arrive in some of those camps, move them to safer areas so that they cannot escape?
Anissa is far away. It's a 45-mile from the border. Where are you going to move them? We asked the international community, please find the space we can move them to a safer space. As you said, this is not the leverage had done. Mr. Trump has took 4 of beetles from that area to secure area, which we expecting is in Iraq.
Yes, but
why he didn't? Why?
Well, you mentioned these 2 individuals, the so-called beetles. They're British prisoners. They were fighters with Islamic State. They're believed to have committed terrible crimes. The United States has removed them. In the middle of all of this crisis of the recent days, the US took these 2 prisoners, and as you say, we believe they're in Iraq. But the point is there were at least 50 other prisoners on an American list of high-value IS suspects. And according to a report in the New York Times, when the Americans approached the Syrian Defense Forces, that is the Kurdish Syrian force, to get access to these other prisoners, high-value prisoners, that access was denied and they remain in your custody. Why were you not prepared to give them up to the Americans?
Which is not true. We have been given to the Americans. But because of the bombardments, now you cannot move them. This is not we let them to escape. This is absolutely not true. We try, and we try now as well. There was yesterday there was a statement, the ISIS fighters in prison will be secured and kept safe. But the Turkey bombarded an ISIS camp. Turkey bombarded, and it will be chaos there, and they make it to escape. It's not us. It's the Turkey's aim now to rescue them.
You, the Kurdish Syrians, are now paying the price for your decision to link yourselves so closely to the PKK, the insurgent group inside Turkey. The reason the Turks have moved into northern Syria is because they say they have to act against a terrorist group, i.e. your group, which is a close, intimate relationship with the PKK. You are one and the same thing.
This is the pretext of Turkey.
But it's actually true, isn't it?
It's not true. It's not true and is not reality. In 2016, the KRG, the Kurdish region in northern Iraq, tried to do independent. And Mr. Barzani, President Barzani, is a close ally to Turkey and is close ally to the Western, as you know. Why Turkey was attacking him and preventing him to do it? He's not a PKK. He's against PKK. He's a close ally. And he's working with Turkey and relying on Turkey's economy. So that means Turkey is not genuine.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that the Turkish agenda in Iraq may be different.
The HP, let me clear this point clearly. We Kurds, PYD, and all the Kurdish political movement in Syria, we are a Syrian. We have our own relationship. We have equal relationship with KDP, Kurdistan Region Government. We have a same Kurdish Talabani and Barzani, and we consider all of the another Kurdish political parties in different parts of Iraq, Iran, Turkey as a Kurdish movement.
Mr. Simu, here are some facts. The facts are that the YPG, that is the military wing of your own party, the YPG group inside Kurdish Syria, has in the past unfurled banners and posters during its operations showing Abdullah Öcalan, the imprisoned founder of the PKK. Here is another fact. The Director of National Intelligence in the United States, back in 2018, said of your YPG, he said, the YPG is the Syrian militia wing of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, that is the PKK. The United States regards the YPG as a terrorist organization, so does the UK and the Europeans. This is the reality. It's a reality that you always deny, but it is the reason why the Turkish military is on your territory today.
This is not reasonable reasons. This is not a fact. So if I'm supporting, imagine Kurd living in Kermanshah in Iran, as he is a Kurd, and he like Öcalan. Does it mean he is Öcalani?
No, but if one looks at the evidence, there is clear evidence that the command structure, the organization of the YPG is intimately connected to the PKK.
This is not true. The US was make it clear it's not true. Yes, and UK, why could make it clear is not true.
Is it also not? Well, okay, you've said it's not true. Let's just move on to other aspects of troubling aspects of the YPG. Is it true that the YPG uses child soldiers?
No. They have been declared, the Syrian Democratic Forces had.
So why do you think the United Nations, Human Rights Watch and other independent human rights groups have all said there is clear evidence that the YPG uses, recruits and sometimes kidnaps children to serve in your military forces?
It was some individual cases, and since 2015 they have signed the agreement, Geneva Agreement, for not recruiting underage. But it was some individual, not in the front line. There was some young under 18, it was 16, 17s, and then they stopped it since the agreement of Geneva Convention.
So you acknowledge that as of August 2018, the latest Human Rights Watch report, you acknowledge that there has been recruiting of children, including girls, using some in hostilities, despite pledges to stop.
It was individual cases, and is stopped.
Let's finish, because we have to finish in a moment. Let's finish with what's going to happen now, because as a result of the Turkish invasion of your territory, you have reached out to President Assad. You've asked the Syrian army to take positions on the border, indeed to retake towns that were held by you, but you seem to want the Syrian army to move in now. Do you really believe that President Assad and his forces are going to be reliable protectors of the Syrian Kurds?
They are their duty. It's not believing or not believing. This is the fact. This is not only Kurds in Syria who have to defend the border of Syria. From Dar'a, to Kamishli. But
the point is, Mr. Semu, for the last, what, 6-7 years, the Kurds in north and northeast Syria have essentially run their own affairs.
Still running of these affairs.
But if you're inviting Assad and his regime and their military to take over, you will no longer be running your own. It is the end. It is the end.
This is not true agreement. The compromise was, and the Russian, mediated by the Russian, on Friday, they come, the Russian delegation. The agreement is the Syrian military forces, in order to defend the airspace, the Russian and the Syrian military will move to only towns. This is a military agreement and has no regards to the autonomous administration. The administration is running. They will just come to the border. They will not even enter the cities and towns.
You've now described how you feel the Americans have utterly betrayed you, and now you're telling me that you really trust President Assad to keep to an agreement which sounds to me...
It's nothing with trust or not trust. It's a fact. This is your duty, Syrian regime, as my duty. I'm protecting the border, and you have to protect your border. If you are not able to protect your border, then I have to look for somewhere else to protect my people.
So you think that the Syrian army, under the command of President Assad, is now going to fight the Turkish army, do you?
This is supposed to. Because
do you really believe that's going to happen?
Hopefully will happen. Why not?
Let me just end by reading to you a quote from the Commander-in-Chief of the SDF, that is your militia armed force in northeast Syria. He said, "For us Kurds, there are going to be painful compromises with the Assad government and with the Russians. We don't trust their promises. To be honest, it's hard to know who to trust. But if we have to choose between compromise and the genocide of our people, we will surely choose life for our people." Is that what it's come to?
That's right. This is the correct positions. And therefore I'm saying the people, yes, we don't trust, but this is their duty. I'm calling you to do your duty. And I'm doing my duty. I honored my duty. But I wanted you to share with me the duty as well.
Do you think the survival of your people is at stake?
It is very seriously at stake. And the international community ought to do something to prevent this genocide.
We have to end there. But Alan Semu, I thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you.